everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is José Gaona, President and CEO of Zeta. Today, we are talking about the future of energy in this Tech Talk, nuclear innovation powering the digital world. So let's get into it. When we talk about the future of energy, we're really talking about the future of our generation. The emergence of energy-intensive technologies like artificial intelligence are accelerating energy demand. Data centers alone are projected to consume up to 12% of the nation's energy output by 2030, according to the Department of Energy. Without significant advancements in energy production and supply, the US risks falling behind other developed nations in the race to lead the digital world. Enter nuclear energy. It's clean, it's powerful, it's reliable, and it's getting a fresh look from our generation. Not just from scientists, but from entrepreneurs, policymakers, and yes, even Gen Z. This conversation is about busting myths, getting real about the energy demand we're facing, and mapping out where Gen Z fits in, because we really need to have a plan to power our future, while creating jobs and building on cleaner energy foundations. We have two amazing speakers today that I'm going to introduce to you guys, and then we'll get into the conversation. First, I'd like to introduce Dylan Moss, a mechanical engineer at AtkinsRéalis and one of the brilliant minds working on the next generation of nuclear energy. From designing balance of plant components for the CANDU reactors to collaborating with GE Hitachi on the world's first small modular reactor in Darlington, Dylan is helping engineer the future, literally. But he's not just building systems, he's building awareness. As the government outreach lead at NAYGN, North American Young Generation in Nuclear, Dylan helps organize high-impact events like Capitol Hill Day advocacy events, where he advocates for smart, scalable nuclear policy that includes a strong Gen Z voice. We're also thrilled to welcome Kate Doon, Business Development Manager at Johnson Service Group, with a career built at the intersection of workforce strategy and clean energy. Kate is a powerhouse in nuclear and utility recruitment. From the Department of Energy to national labs, she's helped place top-tier talent in some of the most complex energy environments in the country. She's not just filling roles, she's reshaping the energy workforce. Whether it's closing generational gaps, navigating clearer environments, or driving strategic growth in the power sector, Kate brings a data-driven, client-focused perspective to this conversation. And if you're wondering how Gen Z fits into the future of energy, well, I think between the three of us, we have the answers. It's so nice to have you all on this Tech Talk. Aside from the fact that we all like each other and we're all friends, I think this is going to be one of the most amazing conversations yet. How are you all doing?
Hey, I am happy. It's Friday. Just saw you guys recently, so you guys always lift up my energy, literally.
Yeah, so excited to have you.
Yeah, we're doing good. I just got back from Denver doing the NAYGN Continental Conference, which was really exciting.
Yeah.
And obviously that brings a lot of positivity to the space. So I'm fresh, I'm caught up. So yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's what we're here to do, right? Like there's so much content out there around nuclear, around kind of new conversations that are emerging. But we have not seen many intersections that talk about Gen Z, the tech aspects, the digital world demands, and nuclear energy. So hoping to really dive into that with you all today from a couple of different angles. So let's get into it. The first thing that I want to talk about with you all is some basics, right? Let's break down nuclear for folks that are maybe still new and need kind of a rundown, right? So Dylan, I'm looking to you. Can you give us a non-technical breakdown of how nuclear energy is actually produced? Like, how does it work, and what's the engineering magic behind it?
Yeah. So if anyone's familiar with any old-fashioned power plant, you'll know that you've got typically steam running through a turbine that's generated by a various heat source. Well, nuclear is the same in this regard. It's a heat source that comes from the chemical chain reaction of fission uh, due to uranium, of course, that is mined and refined, actually similarly to coal, but it is much more energy dense. So we have fuel pellets, which are about the size of a gummy bear. And usually, if this was a more interactive experience, I'd reach out to the audience and say, if you had to guess, how much power was one gummy bear's worth of nuclear fuel? Maybe you guys have a chat. I'm not sure I can see it, but um, just a couple seconds here to maybe get some responses in the chat. If you had to guess how much power, let's say over the course of a year, what could a gummy bear's worth of a nuclear pellet fuel?
I mean, I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm curious to guess myself, but I also don't want to make myself look uneducated.
Yeah. To give a frame of reference, a typical advanced reactor, one of our large scale plants, has about 2 million of these pellets in the reactor core. It's it's obviously a building size where that the reactor is, but one pellet. Here's the answer: could fuel a single family home for a year.
Wow.
And then
Wow.
these
That's incredible.
It is incredible. It's an incredibly energy dense fuel, and that's what's really exciting about nuclear, because uh, coal's energy density is orders of magnitude smaller, and the fuel cycle is roughly 18 to 24 months, which means this fuel stays in the reactor for almost 2 years at a time before it needs to be removed. And once it is removed, it doesn't really leave the site. So currently, regulation states that we just hold on to this nuclear fuel waste, and when the time comes, which we're all hoping will be very, very soon, the U.S. will begin recycling procedures just like France does today, and we won't even have to worry about waste at all. We will just be reusing this spent fuel and making use of all of the uranium that we have. Sorry, my cat's
I see that your cat
my,
also has
my
thoughts.
cat is very passionate about this. Cheddar really cares a lot. So yeah, you have a reactor that is just generating heat the same way a boiler in a coal plant does, the same way a boiler in a gas plant does. It heats some water up, it generates steam, and it passes through a turbine just like any other power plant. So other than the reactor, energy companies are very, very familiar with the technology, and it's pretty much ubiquitous and a lot like Lego blocks, if you think about it.
Yeah. I want to stop there for a second because and open this up to both of you. Um, there's so many misconceptions around like how do these plants work? Like what are the complexities of them that like make them quote unquote dangerous? I was just a part of a conversation recently where when we kind of dove into that. And what we said specifically was Gen Z doesn't operate with all of the misconceptions that like past generations have around nuclear energy, and that's maybe both like a youth component that like they just didn't grow up with some of these incidents that we can point to, but also maybe like a pop culture thing, right? Like I think like some folks might remember or recognize kind of like that like Simpsons like stereotypical like he works at a nuclear power plant. There's like green slime and like it oozes out into everything. He's like drinking it in his coffee. That's just not how this stuff works, right? Like that's just not what nuclear waste is. Like we're talking about solid gummy bear sized pellets that are contained, that have a long lifespan, and that a single pellet can power a family home for a year, you said?
Yeah.
Like this is a very different reality of like what actually is the nuclear energy process than I think what we have maybe heard of in the past. And there's an opportunity there because educating young folks, particularly our generation, on this, we have kind of a clean slate to start with, which I think is really awesome, right? I have a follow-up question, or actually, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. I'm curious to kind of open the floor. Like, what are your thoughts around the way that like younger folks are seeing, like kind of this from a fresh perspective? And that's like an open question. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. I'm happy to move forward, but
I can go. I think that especially some of the conferences this year, it seems that nuclear is more exciting than it has been in a while. And these statements are coming from people that have been working in nuclear for 40 plus years. So I think with that momentum and the benefit of Gen Z not having that past recognition of those events that happened, which were very unfortunate, but we also have to look at what happened in the past. We've learned from it. The NRC, came together, made more regulations on that. Some of it, if we saw it was human error, where can we go from here to make different technology to go past this? So I think by looking at our past, it's only going to help with our future. But at the same time, having a clean slate, I really think is so beneficial. And just like you also mentioned, with educating is a huge part. And I know that's how I briefly met Dylan at the NEI forum, and I just became an NAYGN member, so I'm very excited. Yeah, unfortunately, couldn't go to the conference this year, but next year I'll be there. So I feel like I know you guys are starting to educate kids by even the books you're selling, that you're making to show them this isn't something that's scary. It's a lot different than this misconception and this negative that's in the past. We're years ahead now, and who knows what it's going to be in 20 years from now. It could be something totally different and different jobs stemming off of that as well. So it's very exciting.
yeah. Yeah, I ditto. I totally agree. I actually, what's interesting? Our team just did an interview video, kind of one of those street interview style videos, where we asked folks on the street of Washington, D.C., what do you think about nuclear, right? Or when you hear nuclear, what comes to mind? I'm sure you can imagine right now what is coming to mind. But it's fascinating, like to get people's perspectives and to also understand that folks want a lot more information on this stuff, right? Nuclear energy, how that is different from like concerns around nuclear weapons, just like completely different ball games that we're operating in when it comes to the uranium. These are really interesting conversations that we're just not having enough of, right? There are still misunderstandings, misrepresentations to address. And I'm curious, like, what are some of the biggest ones that you all run into in your day to day when you're out there in the world and you tell folks that you're working in nuclear? What are some of the things that you hear that you think are a part of that kind of pop culture um, misrepresentations?
Yeah, it's funny. The Simpsons really did a number on us, didn't they?
Yeah.
It's crazy what 1,000 episodes of one of the most popular television shows of all time can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Kate made a good point. There's kind of a collective memory that society has, right? So when it comes to certain things that we don't want to repeat, it can be unfortunate. But when it comes to certain things that caused us setbacks that we forget, it can be a good thing. So the latest large scale disaster was Fukushima Daiichi in 2011 in Japan, and there's a pretty good amount of misrepresentation of what happened there because that disaster was a success. What happened that day was a story of success behind the engineering of how the plant was supposed to fail. Everything went right. The contamination couldn't have gone like any better. You know what I mean? The people that were irradiated were volunteers that went in after the disaster and chose to take one for the team, so to speak. It's like a horrible turn of phrase for what happened in that situation, but those are volunteers that chose to be contaminated for the sake of the city because all of the failure systems failed correctly, and the immediate aftermath was due to actually hydrogen explosions. So those casualties were due to a failure system failing correctly and the hydrogen being released from the reactor in a way that was as safe as possible. So that's the most recent disaster we have. It's modern history. The next closest thing is Chernobyl, and we all know about that. I don't think there's any more misconceptions about Chernobyl at this point. Um, and then before that, 3 Mile Island, which was also not that horrible either. So it was scary, of course, but yeah, I mean, we're just dealing with the aftermath of essentially a lot of myths. There's like the reality of nuclear energy is that we do, in fact, have to be a certain level of secretive, which is unfortunate for when it comes to public perception. Um, but in the interest of national security, our work does have to be a level of secret because we can't be just letting out these designs and these supply chains can't be revealed. All of this stuff has to be relatively secretive, and the reality is people don't realize coal and gas are just about as secretive. And also the reality is that uh, coal and gas cause more deaths. I couldn't tell you what exactly the rate is, but cause more deaths, like orders of magnitude more than the nuclear power energy does. And I've been inside of a reactor, and it blows people's minds when I tell them. It blows people's minds. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the Carolinas are a big hub. They're very dense with nuclear energy. There's two power plants with four total reactors that power my city. And granted, not a lot of people are from around here. Charlotte has a lot of transplants, but I talk about it and almost nobody knows before I tell them. They're like, I had no idea my power was coming from nuclear, and I don't know what that means, and now I'm kind of scared. It's like, well, I just brought it up to help you out, but
So I can feel myself like rolling up my sleeves and leaning in because there's so much there to explore, right? Like I think like one, as a part of like a younger voice organization, Zeta, like we look at this through the lens of like what are we facing? What is a reality that we're facing with like the energy that we need, right? We talk about like data centers exploding in energy consumption and the projections around that, just that alone, right? Data centers accounting for like so much of our energy consumption over the course of just the next 5 to 10 years. That's like a small component of like our energy demand growth, right? Then you talk about like what we're all experiencing right now on the eastern seaboard, which is like this heat wave and like strain on our grid and dated grids. It makes a really compelling argument for us to just look at energy more intensely, right? Look at how we're powering all of these energy needs, particularly for the digital world, right? That's like a component of the conversation. The other component is, you know, for a generation, Gen Z, right? What we work on at Zeta, for a generation that across the political spectrum is constantly sharing that one of their primary concerns, if not the first or second, one of their top three concerns is always climate, right? What are we doing about climate? What are we doing about our clean energy goals? How are we getting there? This presents one of the most, if not the most, like feasible solution for us to meet carbon emission reduction goals. We see China headed that way in the way that they're building out nuclear power plants to try to meet some of their goals by 2050. This is the opportunity we have to create sustained baseline power for the digital world in a way that gives us stability where solar and wind just are not right now, right? Like where they cannot. While also meeting like reduction goals in carbon emissions. That's like phenomenal. And I say that as somebody who comes from a conservation background as well, someone who like has spent years advocating for public lands, water, yeah, clean energy goals. when I started learning about nuclear energy, I really saw hope, understanding that like this is not going to be easy, right? Like as energy consumption grows, what is the solution? And yet here we have this like incredibly viable, known, existing industry with promise, right? That is, I think, the narrative that is so important to also bring in, because it paints a different picture. You touched on, and then we'll kind of keep the conversation, but you touched, Dylan, on the safety numbers. When you break down the actual mortality rates, impact to communities of all the energy industries, nuclear is, I think, first or second, the safest by a lot. Like by a lot, by a long shot. And we are happy to link that videos and sources to like those statistics once we make this webinar published on our YouTube, so folks can see those numbers for themselves and explore that information. Because I also don't know it off the top of my head, but the number difference is insane. The reason we don't see that is because when something happens or with nuclear, it gets a lot of attention, right? It gets a lot of attention, which then is detrimental to the broader narrative of trying to work on some of the largest issues we have facing humanity today, right? I know that's a lot to kind of throw out there.
That's
I think it's
something else
important
to
though,
add,
right?
Jose, as well, just because when I started, I had no idea what nuclear was. And it was in 2017, after I graduated college, I went to South Carolina. I was working at a recruiting firm and they had a whole section that was energy and engineering. And I was like, great, cool. And I had no idea what I was doing or getting myself into, but slowly and slowly I understood. And where I guess it pressed me the most is when I was recruiting for Savannah Riverside or positions for either any other national labs, AECOM, GE. The age gap differentiator was huge. And I was concerned because some of these jobs we cannot run our nation without. And the fact that I'm calling guys out of retirement to fill them because they are the only ones that are verified, then the local college, which was Clemson, which that's against me, but anyway, very good engineering school. And the engineers coming out of there were not the numbers that we thought it was going to be, especially in civil industrial, which you could still do industrial in a nuclear power plant, but even so, preliminary, if you were looking for a nuclear engineer, I think there was one that graduated that year. And believe me, they are not going to go and work at Savannah Riverside. They're getting top dollar anywhere else because they're so slim to none. But with that experience as well, it's just not there. So there's a huge gap. Where do we push everyone? So that's where I started to get concerned. I was like, why is no one else seeing this and concerned like I am? I'm just the recruiter here, trying to fill these roles, but I was like, I'm scared. And so I feel like at the time too, it didn't have as good of momentum as it does now. It didn't have as much light. And like you said, bringing the technology into it, that was never a question back then. So that's what's really exciting to see.
Yeah. It presents opportunity not only to address some of these really large societal problems that we're facing around energy, clean energy, but also to provide economic opportunity for people in building out this industry as we need it, right? And we'll get into some of those areas around workforce shortages and some of the work that we've been doing to highlight that a little bit more. Now that we've kind of adequately talked about these misconceptions, how we're really looking at this broader narrative, I want to move into a conversation around the current demand, right, and where our supply is and why this is so pertinent right now. So Dylan, energy demand will soon eclipse supply nationally. It already has in states such as South Carolina. What kind of concerns are there with energy deficits becoming so common?
Yeah, I mean, number one is blackouts, of course. I 2 days ago, maybe yesterday, got a text from Duke Energy that was basically begging for me to turn my thermostat up because
Oh, really?
because the grid is fragile during a heat wave. And I mean, that's always been the case, right? Heat waves are always going to stress the grids, especially in the South, especially in Southern California.
It
And
did just recently this past week in New York City as well. So that's
yes,
scary.
absolutely. There, I mean, I was in Denver and it was 100. And those people just couldn't even take it. They just escaped. They went up to the mountains because they were just they fled like they were refugees from 100 degrees. I was like, it's kind of nice. It's a dry heat, but no, I mean, obviously the number one is blackouts. But I think we're gonna get to this point here in our next segment. But the interesting thing about nuclear is that we have a really interesting prospect that we can be independent from grids. But I think we'll get to that here in a minute.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is important context for folks that are kind of introducing themselves to these notions of like energy and this reality that like energy doesn't magically show up just because you plug something in to your wall socket, right? Like it's not just there, right? It doesn't come out of thin air. There is an entire industry that looks at like how much energy do we need to power the consumption that everyone is exercising, right? And at times like this, when I think about like how hot it is outside, as an individual, how hot it is outside, and how much I rely on like my AC to keep me sane, it becomes a big question. Like, what are we doing to make sure that like we are, building sustainable, energy supply for our future needs? Because it really is, I mean, it's growing a lot. These strains will get worse. And personally, I do not want to live in a place where I'm constantly seeing these rolling blackouts and I just have to like sleep in like 110-degree weather, particularly in the summer as our climate continues to shift a little bit. I don't want to do that. We want some solutions here that are also addressing climate issues, right? So I think that contextualizes it a little bit better as well. Kate, I want to go to you here. From your perspective, working closely with energy companies, how is this spike in energy demand, especially around tech, right? AI, digital infrastructure, shaping the kinds of projects and investments that companies are prioritizing right now?
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting because I recently in May went to the SAFE Summit, and that is secure energy for everyone. So we when I was there, they were speaking a lot on just critical minerals and how we're at a deficit and we need Congress, and it's a bipartisan issue and we need to be pushing on and on. And I think since then, even though it's only been a couple of months, it's really steamrolled because they were saying how, listen, and I think I even touched on, I saw one of the questions in there about ROI. That was one of the issues that they were talking about because you're not going to see an immediate ROI for any company. So that's where they want the government to step in, which they have before. They have had, different places where they've had it for like 50 years, the DoD, especially with the OSC, with having just a confined loan, and they are basically banking for the DoD. And they used to give out loans a lot, especially to advance our technology. And a great example was after Sputnik happened. Right after that, they said, let's go. We're not going to be the last to be on the moon. So I think that from everyone really going either to Congress or just a lot of these forums and conferences really have highlighted all the same issues and just keep pushing, pushing, pushing. Just like Chris Wright was pushing it, we just need to get there. So now I'm seeing, as going to the AWS summit last week, and just even Microsoft now getting involved and investing in 3 Mile Island. AWS is now investing a lot in X Energy as well. So it's been a shift the past couple of months of now corporations are like, we need to invest now because it's taking too long for the government to step up. The regulation is needed, yes, in some aspects, but it's also holding us back. So that's another negative. We need things now because we are at a deficit now, and it's only going to get worse if we don't do something about it. So it's really like heartwarming to see all these corporate, obviously money's involved, but at the same time, I think that this should be the biggest issue out of anything. If we don't have energy, our world can't go on. It's a national securities issue. I know we were even talking about, being hot in the summer, not being able to sleep, but
It contextualizes
that's
it,
just one
right?
thing.
Yeah.
Like, all anarchy can break loose. Different countries, it could be their opportunity to do different things as far as like either hacking, or if I don't know, different ways of going around that maybe they wanted access to the United States. It makes us very vulnerable. And that's where it is a huge national securities issue. So I think that this should be number one on the list, no doubt. Also, all of our grids are running from 20th century when now we're in 21st century technology. Obviously, it's not going to withstand, and we're only getting further and further. Just when you opened up about AI and data centers specifically, they did not account for this energy when they've been polling for years and years to make sure that we're on a good line to not have a deficit. This was not in the picture. There's a median of 27 devices that are needed for these data centers that are in each household. That has never been done before. Also, AI, which it's not going to go away, and we do need it, but we need to keep up. So with being able to team up with small modular reactors instead of using a lot of different water or energy for that is definitely going to help. We just need to get it done and pushing it through. It's great to see the small modular reactors being pushed through with NuScale, and a lot of other companies are following suit. It just takes the NRC a longer time than we would like, which that's where the policy comes through. As well, different representatives standing up and saying, hey, this is an issue now, or big corporations coming together. And I think that's my favorite part of everything. This is the most, I feel like this is a big community. Everyone's coming together and everyone's pushing this through for the better of mankind, because we need this as a nation. We can't have a full supply chain of anything if we don't have this first.
I think you're naming something which is very unique and very important to recognize how special it is, because and for folks that may not know, NRC is Nuclear Regulatory Commission, right? It's the federal kind of oversight body that helps us engage and stay um, making sure that as a nation, we are creating a framework of regulation that keeps us all safe as we're operating within this industry.
We need it.
But there is a modernization. Yeah, we do. We need it, right? We need it. It's important. It's a reason why like our industry in the U.S. is so safe, right? We need it. We need that. But we need modernization of this industry as it's tackling very rapidly evolving needs in energy, specifically around tech, which is where Zeta gets really excited about this work, because we see that wave coming from tech as well, right? With the Googles and the Microsofts, who are looking to like nuclear as kind of leaders in helping us address these demands. That's really, I think, important to recognize. No one's saying like, let's create this wild, wild west system where folks get to do whatever they want and they're operating in a way that's unsafe. That's like nowhere near the case. We do need reform, regulation reform that is creating streamlined processes for us to actually do something about the issues we're facing in time, right? And that's what where folks are working together, which is so exciting to see on the part of like our public private partnership, right? Our government, folks in government, folks in the private sector, in energy, in tech, they're all coming together to kind of say, how do we move this forward? Because we need to. Otherwise, we are going to be facing those difficult realities in our day to day as we continue to build out the digital future. I want to talk about briefly some of the ways that we've seen us engage with some of the older infrastructure and then transition into kind of what we're seeing in new technologies. So I have a question here to both of you. How well is our current grid infrastructure around nuclear energy keeping up, right? What kinds of upgrades around the existing infrastructure do you all see us working on? What are kind of the priorities right now as you all are engaging around industry?
Kate, do you want to take that one, or
You can go, Dylan, first.
Well, the reality of U.S. electricity grids is that they have been bad for a long time, and they've been behind since before AI. They've been behind since before heat waves. Um, it's it's disheartening the more you look into it, how our grids are engineered and how the utilities go about maintaining them and upgrading them. So from my perspective, unfortunately, this has nothing to do with nuclear. It has nothing to do with uh, modern technology. This is the utilities sort of. I mean, I hope nobody in here is a representative of a utility, but unfortunately, they're incentivized to cut corners and the easiest place to do that is on the lines and transmission, and just avoiding that maintenance cost is a really systemic issue that the whole country is facing. I mean, we saw the huge impacts in Texas last winter, and that came down to utilities. I mean, obviously the regulatory bodies could have stepped up and done something about it years and years beforehand. Um, so yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think one of the more exciting prospects that we are putting forth with nuclear energy is obviously our SMRs have the ability to be grid independent, right? They can essentially be implemented on their own grid, and then a few years down the road, I'm not sure who's first to market with these, but we're also looking at micro reactors, which are basically a competitor to wind turbines. So they're in the magnitude of about 5 megawatts as opposed to 200, 300, 400 megawatts, where for frame of reference, like a traditional power plant is 1,000, 2,000 megawatts. So, I mean, yeah, we're looking at potentially being able to circumvent this very, very huge systemic issue, but the issue exists nonetheless.
When I started, I did nuclear, but I also did engineering as well as utilities. And I can agree with you on that, Dylan. Um, I think that's where there needs to be more either power from the government to, go in there and see where they're making their most profit and where they're cutting their costs. It needs to be a service to the people. It's our energy. We need grid decentralization because the grids right now, where they're located and just in general, we need to upgrade them and all of that. But at the end of the day, grid decentralization will really help with our national security again if something is to happen, or if there is attack. If we do it on that grid, you're done. We don't want that to happen. We have to have it more spread out, more high tech. Like I said, they're 20th century grids. We need better structure here. So I think it's where everyone needs to come together. what I'm doing now as business development manager at Johnson Service Group, I do utilities as well as nuclear and engineering, and just seeing a lot of the roles that they are a part also with nuclear, because if they're reopening a plant, or which is, in talks some areas here now that never thought was going to happen before, it's all a domino effect. So I think that all of them coming together and making sure that we're doing it in due process, making the best that we can. So it will be not the cheapest and just to cut corners, so we can have it for the longest. And we as a whole of the United States can be good with that. And I know there's different companies that are competitors and they're competing for profit. But at the end of the day, they're doing us a service as well, and they're a provider of something, and they have to hold their stance and hold their oath to what they're doing. I know Chris Wright even was saying, just like, he has the biggest ongoing concern for grid reliability, and that, for someone to say that, that's concerning, so it's definitely something that I think.
Particularly given his role.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And also his previous role.
Yeah.
So I think that he's seen it from being at Liberty and now being at the highest level of his position, seeing it in a different lens. So I feel like this is all a conversation point. I'm so glad it's a bipartisan issue that everyone is so passionate about and seeing like we need to act now, because I don't think things would be rolling as fast as they are right now. They need to roll faster, honestly, but they wouldn't be trickling along like they are if it wasn't for that. So, and a lot of that has come down to education, talking about it, letting people know what is going on right now and why it matters, and finding passionate people to speak about it, policy and education from the ground up. So, grid, we need to just, yeah, we need to get on that as soon as possible. It was funny you were saying that, Dylan, earlier. My sister lives in New York City, and she was told to turn off her air conditioning. The whole city was, and she was like, okay, but Times Square is still flashing its lights, but I might die of heat stroke. Got it. So it's it's just something that we have to take into account. And if a provider is asking someone of that, what harm are you putting your own customers in with the heat as well? So it just, we really need to go into grid decentralization, making sure they're top tier, getting into that. I'm not as well versed in grids as I am in some other aspects, but I, learning from all of these forums and different conferences I've been going to recently, it's all the same message. It's all the same people saying the same thing. And this repetitiveness has been great, because I think it's opening doors right now and it's pushing it to the right people.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And I'm like over here, like metaphorically rolling up my sleeves again, because this is an interesting part of the conversation, right? We're talking about, and for those of you that don't know, we've mentioned Secretary Wright a few times. Secretary Chris Wright is the Secretary of the Department of Energy. So really leading conversations right now under the current administration, and very vocal around his support for some of these efforts in nuclear. I know we all heard him speak at the National Energy Policy Forum that NEI had, where we all met.
Yes. He was right up
And
in
he talked
front of
about these
me.
priorities. Yeah, exactly. And he was very like impassionate about our need to make sure that we are meeting the consumption demands that our communities have all over the country. And really that puts people first, right? I do want to acknowledge that there are quite a few questions in the chat, and we'll get to those once we get through our conversation points. So keep those coming, folks. I think those are shaping up really nicely. I want to talk about something that is also really core to our work at Zeta, which is the economy, which is work, right? Where young people, Gen Z specifically as a generation, is looking to channel their labor. To paint the picture there, and I talk about this often, Gen Z is a smaller generation than any generation before them. They're smaller than millennials in population size. They're smaller than Gen X. They're much smaller than baby boomers. And they are the generation that over the course of the next 10 years will be entering the workforce. So they are the ones we're looking at right now to say, are you going to meet the labor needs that we have in these industries as we're trying to build them out and address these larger issues? You have to, like, by virtue of numbers, you have to be very intentional about channeling folks into these industries when you have less of them replacing, a larger population of past generations. Kate, you were touching on this earlier, having to like constantly look at folks in retirement to pull them in to come back to work on some of these areas where we just can't find the young labor force right now, or it's difficult to do so. For additional context for this conversation, 10,000 baby boomers are retiring almost every single day. That's a lot, right? And it's an aging population. It really kind of paints a picture of like, why is a conversation around nuclear energy, energy industry, workforce really important for young people to not only learn about, get involved with, but to lead? Because it's really us and folks around our age and the folks that are coming up just behind us that are going to be filling this industry, right? Making sure that it is well fed enough with labor to actually get us to where we need to go. The plus, like the additional benefit of that is it's an industry that provides middle class, solid jobs for people at a time when there's so much like ambiguity and shift and concern around AI automation across our economy. This is a space where there's actually a lot of opportunity, and there will be. And that's, like, to me also a really exciting part of the conversation, because when I ask people, like, what kind of jobs do you think make up nuclear industry? They're like, nuclear physicists. That's it. That's all you need, right? No, there's like so much more that goes into that. Like, I mean, you all are examples of the opportunity in industry, and we need to do some of that education work too. So that's kind of what this next section is about, looking at building the workforce, Gen Z, nuclear careers. So I'm going to start with you, Kate. From your vantage point, working with energy sector employers, what does the current nuclear workforce look like? I know you touched on it a little bit, but where are these gaps? Like, what is the day-to-day when you're seeing these things on the ground?
So I really think that when I was starting and saw that as a concern, yes, but it's also partnering with the right companies. And I can also speak on behalf of the company I'm at now. Like, they've been around for 40 years. They have a pipeline of candidates that have been, for 15, 20 years. They know the market well. Our recruiters know the market well. So it's being companies being able to team up with strategic partners, whether it be workforce solutions or staffing, to be able to see what is beyond of what we can just find and have that relationship. On the other hand, though, there is still a shortage. That is just one of the things that will help further along your project, or just make it a quicker time to fill, because that is an issue. But beyond that, that's where I want to take the step of not just any recruiting agency and going above and beyond to educate, to be able to go out there, spread awareness, go to different conferences, see who best I can partner up with, and not just for work, not for me to have as a client, but for me to be able to see what is down the line for us as a whole, and getting the younger generation involved, having people understand even what workforce solution means or a staffing agency means. There's a lot of times when I say that, and again, just like some of the bad nuclear circumstances that I've had in the past, I'm sure every person can raise their hand and say that they've either dealt or heard of a staffing agency that they had a negative experience with. But it's going above and beyond that is really holding something special, also being able to help and be the solution to this problem. So that is one thing, like I really think education, but also thinking outside of the box. We don't know what jobs are even going to be happening now with technology advancing and Gen Z getting involved. On top of that, for every 10 nuclear positions, there are 18 positions that are then created off of that. So that right there is showing that is growing. There's a lot of talks, about VC summer getting restarted, like, or it didn't start at all, but being able to go in there, and that would be huge. All of these are years and years down the line, but this is where we have to start now to be able to see that for the future. Um, I just think in general, companies like NAYGN or NEI, ANS, even my boss got involved with ANS a lot, and he is on the one of the boards there, but helping to educate and further that. So it's people going beyond what their job description is, being passionate, being able to realize what the issue is and all come together and have a solution. And it doesn't, again, people that are too laser focused on just what is benefiting them for a profit, they're not going to be there long term. This is something that is years and years of work, years and years of dedication, projects, and understanding the ins and outs. So then we can relay that and get the best fit out there. But it also helps us understand that side of the industry, because it is shrinking in that way. But there are other jobs, like even janitor, Savannah River site. I mean, a pretty high up janitor, having to have all the clearances. But that's just an example. There's maintenance, there's training, there's a lot of R&D, there's, I mean, marketing. You can really think of anything but put it into a nuclear facility, or it doesn't even have to be that. You can do policy, how before the DoD, the DOE, or NNSA. All of that helps the cause at the end of the day and is in the same environment. And quite frankly, it's a small knit environment. A lot of you're going to see a lot of the people, or someone knows someone from the last one you went to. And I'm meeting so many people just this year in general, but even thinking back to when I started, it's coming full circle in the best way possible. And I just think we need to keep up this momentum and start with the K through 12 learning, STEM. I know even I'm trying to think. It was a congressman from Virginia. I saw him speak last year at the NBTC, and he was saying how he started programs around Northern Virginia to go out there and educate grades 1 through 3, with the data centers coming up so much, as well as wanting to expand on that and get nuclear. Because that was one of my biggest questions. You guys want to bring all these nuclear plants and build, and yes, it's a years down the line, but are you also preparing on the education side? Are you preparing for the workforce side? Because one cannot go without the other.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because it gives folks a really clear picture of just how much other adjacent economic opportunity and workforce opportunity goes into running the infrastructure of the industry, right? There is a lot of opportunity there. You mentioned from like janitor to like marketing to policy. This is
Now
economic
AI,
opportunity.
which we never thought we would see
AI,
before, cybersecurity, it just, the list goes on.
yeah, I think that's so important for folks to understand that it creates opportunity again, right? Like for a generation that ironically needs to be more intentional about where they're filling in these gaps, because we have so many millions of openings. We have, and I always forget the number, whether it's 5 or 7, but we have millions of job openings, and we have millions of Gen Z looking for jobs. And it's like, well, we need to channel them. You mentioned something which I think is important, which is like the STEM education, K through 12 education. One of the things that we wholeheartedly believe at Zeta as well is you have to educate folks, and you have to bring folks information where they are already digesting content.
Right.
And if we know anything about our generation, it's that they digest content on social media, right?
Differently
They
than
think about
everyone
career
else.
opportunities on social media. It's different, right? It's
But
very
it's
different.
good.
And so, one of the exciting things about this conversation is this will end up on social media, right? Like these, I'm pretty sure your like piece about like these are the kind of jobs that like folks don't think about, that will go on social media. Like, and
Yeah.
that's valuable, because then folks hear it where they are looking for information around life, career opportunities, right? Like all those things. And so that's something that we get really excited about doing, because we know that's where we need to go, where we haven't gone before, right? Dylan, I want to turn it over to you, as someone who's come up through this industry, right, and now takes on so much initiative and leadership. What did your path look like, and what would you want Gen Z to know about starting a nuclear career?
Yeah, I obviously don't want to start too far back, but I did my high school senior project on alternative fuels, which if you've had any interest in the energy industry for at least going 10 years back, you would be familiar with this term peak oil, which was like a very big thing back in like the energy crisis. So like 2008 era, all the way back to the 70s, which is a concept that's now effectively been debunked. But it's basically the concept that like we're going to run out of oil. And it's just like, it sounds scary, but it's been debunked because the reality is there's so much of it in the earth that there's just no possible way that could happen, which is unfortunate from the conservationists, for the conservationists in us, right? Like that would be a heaven sent if we just ran out and like, oops, we can't burn fossil fuels anymore. Well, that's not true. They're gonna last. But what got me interested was I'm a big car guy, and I'm like, well, conservationism and obsession with cars doesn't really align. How can I, mesh these two? And then EVs became a huge thing. And it's like, okay, well, EVs take a bunch of electricity. It's like, all right, well, basically just the snowball rolled, and I landed on nuclear energy. It's just so fascinating and so unique how it really just feels like a silver bullet. It feels like it. I mean, I'm a passionate about it, passionate advocate, but like it's really hard for me to not think of it as this amazing silver bullet. It's there was a concept I learned about where electrify transportation, decarbonize electricity, right? Like that 1-2 punch where we've got our transportation sector accounts for not as much as the grid. I think like it's 30-70 basically, where the energy use goes to transportation versus electricity. But I mean, that's a big number regardless. And I might still be wrong. But the idea here is that we have this huge opportunity for a synergy. And so I got really excited about that. And when I did mechanical engineering for my degree, I explored a couple options. I did internships as I could get them, and then as soon as I graduated, it was straight to Westinghouse, which is a huge American name in nuclear. It's kind of one of the originals, and they're still doing huge things, and they're hiring like it's nobody's business. You wouldn't even believe the numbers that they are doing. It'd spin your head. But yeah, I mean, my education as a mechanical engineer gave me a lot of opportunities. It's a broad field. It's not like nuclear, where like if I was a nuclear engineer, I'd be going into reactor mechanics. Like My job right now, it applies to everything. I worked a couple weeks ago on a gas turbine. I did. I didn't want to do it, but it was just the contract that was put in front of me. And, my expertise just happens to align with almost any power plant. And yeah, I mean, the reality is that all of these, at least nuclear focused companies, are hiring like it's nobody's business. They need people because we see what's ahead of us, and that makes it super exciting. That's true. But there's also that disconnect that Kate mentioned regarding like an age gap, basically. I remember when I first started, it was like me and a couple folks that were just hired to Westinghouse that were fresh graduates, and then there was like a good like 15 years, and then that's where the senior engineers were. Like it was as if they hadn't hired anyone for 15 years, and then all of a sudden they need 100 people now. And that's kind of how it looks. That wasn't just Westinghouse. I think GE is kind of facing a similar situation. I think Constellation is facing a similar situation. So um, it makes it exciting for us, right? Like it makes it exciting for Kate. This puts her in a very job secure position. It puts me in a very job secure position. Um, but yeah, obviously there it's not just engineers, like you said. It's like I think one of the really important things, if anyone knows a tradesman, you know that they are most likely on the road. When I was at the Vogel construction site, I worked with a lot of tradesmen. I mean, it wasn't an department just for engineering. So I was working directly with the tradesmen, and they were from all over the place, and they were also there temporarily. They were in Georgia for the time being until the work was done, and then it was on to the next. And that's just kind of how the tradesmen live their life. They live out of trailers, man, and they get it done. Yeah. So that's obviously a big role that needs to be filled right now. And if you're listening here and you're the kind of person who maybe is like, I don't know if I want to do a 4-year degree, man, the trades are a place to be.
The maintenance within, but there was one thing that I totally forgot to say, but once you're starting on a new project, especially with the SMRs right now, a lot of them are going from R&D into commercialization. They're going to first get the project managers for that. After that, after they get someone, all that follows is financial. And people forget about that. The finance industry, but specifically in oil and gas. So if you're in finance and want something exciting, definitely, check into that because it teaches you and you'll have skills of different either oil and gas or nuclear companies. Houston's a hotspot for all of that for sure, but especially with the finance on nuclear. So I that's another trade that you wouldn't think of right off the bat.
Yeah. I this is also a really exciting a part of the conversation because it really makes it tangible for folks to understand like where is their opportunity right now. I see that that was one of the questions we had here in the chat from folks was like where can young people look for these opportunities right now? I mean, I think what we're saying is there are a lot, right? And we are happy to connect resources and links here as well. Once again, this goes up on YouTube and across our social media. We'll make sure that we're making those connections for folks. But it is a wonderful time, right? As we're seeing a coordinated effort on the part of people, industry, government to really meet this really critical moment. There are a lot of opportunities for people who are looking for well-paying, stable jobs. Um, I want to take a moment to look forward and then kind of get into some open questions here. We've talked a lot about all these different stakeholders, how they interact, how industry is shifting, why it's so important, the needs of the future, the needs of tomorrow, really, like quite literally right now. Um, what gives you both hope that we're headed in the right direction, and what role do you all think that young people can continue to play in accelerating this future?
Okay, you want to take that first?
Sure. I think it's more exciting than ever due to the fact that you can feel the energy literally when you're at a lot of these conferences or meeting with people, and just even the companies, whether it's utilities, power, or nuclear, everyone's so excited right now. They haven't felt this buzz in so long. And I haven't been in it for as many years as a lot of people. So someone with so many years of 40 plus to say that is definitely something that's exciting. But also, I think it comes to Gen Z. They're opening up our eyes to looking at things differently and bringing that technology surge and saying, hey, we can have both. This can optimize everything. Where before that was the biggest no, and it was almost like stuck in the dust. No one wanted to help to improve any processes. It is the way it is, so let's keep it that way. And that shouldn't be the mindset. We need to keep powering forward. I think we all collectively could be a powerhouse for nuclear, and eventually get to full supply chain, but we need everyone to push forward and be all in this together. I think another thing is, there's a lot of turmoil in different opinions, and we're the United States and we're great for a reason, but the fact that it's the biggest bipartisan issue, it just it makes it feel like it's right, and this is something that is not even questioning that we need, as well, being able to just think about our future generations and what we need to improve it for them. I think the push for either the government and having the corporations step up, which they haven't before, them doing that in the past couple of months is showing that the message is loud and clear and people are understanding and seeing where they can get involved. And once big houses, come in and do that, then others will trickle down. People are going to be investing more because of it. I know that already. So many people are like, oh, nuclear is the word, like I should be investing in this and this company. So it's economic growth on top of everything else. But even from a community standpoint, VC Summer at the time, being right outside of Columbia where I went to school, I know I didn't personally go or work there, but a lot of, my friends' parents would work on the project, even though it was in preliminary. So it all helps people out in whatever trade that you need. And it's something that is benefiting us at the end of the day that we need and is detrimental. So I don't think it's a question of if or why or when. We need to put money into this, and it should be the first thing that everyone is. So even with some of, I know recently the tax credits being taken away, and everyone was a little upset about that. It was awesome to see Chris Wright and Governor McMaster from South Carolina go right away and press on the issue. Like, people are responding. They're not taking a step back and taking no for an answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's 100% right. I think that does give me a lot of hope too. I think you said that really well. Dylan, what about you? I'm curious to hear your perspective too.
Yeah, I just got back, like I mentioned, from the Denver NAYGN Continental Conference. Of course, really, really exciting place to be. I mean, everybody is just so pumped and so positive. And, I guess it's not just Gen Zs there. There's a few millennials in there. They're still young. But yeah, man, they send out a survey every couple of years. I don't think it's every year. And so we reviewed some of the numbers that we got back from that survey. And if we haven't incentivized you enough already, here were some of the really interesting numbers that came back. The average salary for just a person in the nuclear industry, not necessarily an engineer, not necessarily someone in the technical side. It was compared to other industries and their role. was like 20% higher or something salary. Like significantly, like the highest, one of the highest paying industries you can be in. So if that's not incentive enough, I don't know what to tell you. And then there's also a really exciting thing is we've closed the gender pay gap, at least according to our research, is that um, you can see an interesting on a time scale, you can see an interesting closing of the gap where, unfortunately, the women that are a little bit older, more senior employees, they are, looking at a little bit of a pay gap, but down the line, our younger employees, the pay gap is closed. And that was a really exciting thing to see in just when it comes to compensation. But yeah, I mean, I've been really uplifted lately when it comes to just connecting with not only NAYGN and obviously check us out at naygn.org. If you're curious, there's tons of resources there if you're just curious as to what we do. And my suggestion is like I got a new job back in October, and granted, I had 3-4 years of experience, and that's a big deal when it comes to competing with all of these fresh graduates, and God knows there's a lot of them. But it was actually, people talk about how depressing it is to look for a job. I actually had a good time finding that job. It was a really positive experience for me. Granted, I was pretty incentivized to leave the old one, but the thing is like, man, people are really looking for us. Us, when I say us, I may be referring to engineers, but there's as we discussed, there's way more roles than just engineering, way more roles than just technical. So I mean, it's just a positive space. And Kate mentioned how close knit it is too. It's like it's a very like small town vibe when you work in nuclear. It's like everyone knows everyone somehow, and across the country, across the continent, it's phenomenal. And it's so easy to network because everyone knows a guy who knows a guy, and everyone. It's a unique. Here's an example of why it's unique industry in that sense. Is we have the NRC, right? We talked about the NRC. It's the federal regulatory body, but we've also got something called INPO, the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, and that's completely optional. But I think there's maybe like one power plant that doesn't participate in the entire US. It's a completely optional like research body where basically everybody just contributes reports of like what's going wrong at their power plant. That like the coal industry doesn't do that. The gas industry doesn't do that. We're uplifting each other in like such a community based way that's so unique, and it contributes to just everybody's attitude, and the culture is unique, man. Like we have the phrase like nuclear safety attitude, and it's true. Like, everybody is just so dedicated to this being just like a safe and positive space for us to be able to like get this technology forward and built and in front of everybody, and just powering the future. So yeah, hopefully this is enough positivity for you guys.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think that's exactly what we were hoping to communicate to everybody because, and before getting into just a couple of these questions really quickly, we want to communicate to folks the opportunity that we're faced. And I say this again as someone who is very passionate about conservation, someone who's very passionate about energy, very passionate about climate. Spent a lot of years doing that work, engaging our regulatory bodies on some of the reforms and kind of where priorities should be around energy, around broadband infrastructure, and all these different things with community on the ground. I used to have a lot of issues sleeping at night thinking about climate, thinking about like kind of where we were finding solutions as a movement while also like our demands were just constantly increasing. There's hope here. There's real hope. There's real, aspirations to meet the moment. And we're fortunate enough that, through the trials and tribulations of the past, the hope is coming from an industry that, to both of your points, is organized, is intentional, is thoughtful, and that presents us again with like a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. We have been so welcomed at Zeta by folks that are doing this shared work. It's been so exciting to see such an enthusiasm for diverse voices. And on that note, one of the questions we have is, how can people get involved in the advocacy? And we mentioned NAYGN. I'm a proud member of NAYGN. I think anyone that's really fascinated in this work should look at that. Your folks are also welcome to look at some of our campaign work and some of the content that we put out around nuclear energy and tech at Zeta. So always happy to offer that up as a resource as well. I see that another one of our questions is a little bit more workforce oriented, which, Kate, I might throw your way. I'm looking specifically here at a question by Danielle. With so many emerging roles intersecting nuclear tech and policy, what are companies doing differently in their hiring strategies to attract, oh, and I just lost it. There we go. Attract and retain talent that may not come from traditional energy backgrounds?
Yeah, so for me in specific, it's a little different because I am we are a workforce agency, we are a staffing agency. So we're teaming up with usually their recruiting team or their head of HR and seeing where we could help support them and be partners with them the best. And I like to go into it just like any client. I'm here to service you. What is your need? I'm very communication based. I want to make sure we're on the same page, but also I want to make sure that you're getting the fastest and, most, I would say, attractive candidate for the position that's a good fit, but at the same time, wanting us as a team to not be spinning our wheels. So I think the first step of that, I just wanted to explain because I usually like to go in and speak to, let's say, Duke Energy for the team, the HR team or the hiring manager. I like to go in and have a full conversation with them. What are you struggling with? What are your needs right now? Why it has this position, or not even why. Sometimes it's a why this position isn't being filled, but sometimes it's also a ramp up of something. So understanding the bottom line of that, but then once that happens and you fully understand what the position is, the details on it, I like to go into full detail to really know, so we're not all wasting our time here and we can use the best resources for other support. So once we fully understand, I think the hiring, like doing differently in hiring strategy, it depends on, first of all, who are we trying to get as far as the demographic? Is it like more of a senior role? Is it someone that they want someone that's going to be there for 10 years but is just coming into it? And then from there, teaming up with my recruiting partners. LinkedIn is definitely my favorite, but not everyone is on LinkedIn, especially in the nuclear world that are coming out of retirement. A lot of them are totally off the grid, don't have any social media, or indeed barely want to email you. So it's just networks at that point. And I am a very personal person where I love communication. I love getting to know people and just being able to see how I can support them in any other way. Not that necessarily is benefiting me at all for business or helping out, but I feel like that is the same about different hiring strategies, because even when you're talking to someone, knowing a bigger network, understanding who has been there in the past, where they have found success, where they haven't found success, and opening doors from there. That's just with roles off the bat. But again, I think to be able to scale this is going through the education way or teaming up with different companies as well, like NAYGN, or just getting involved. So I'm able to bring things to light or just be like, oh, I actually know someone for that role. They'd be great. They have this many years of experience, but to look broader than just recruiting tools. Recruiting tools are phenomenal, but they don't paint the whole picture. It's having a good team and being able to also read your client well and read their needs well. I hope that answered it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I'm sure. Yeah. Like and it's so exciting to hear the detail of how, the folks that are looking at collecting, talent and bringing these opportunities to diverse folks and being so thoughtful about it, how that process works. We have one other question that I think we can touch on here as we close out, 'cause I know we've gone a little bit long with such an interesting conversation, um, which is, we talk about some of the issues we're facing. Yes, around grid, around meeting the energy demand, um, around talent shortages. I think the question was getting at, like, what are kind of the solutions to this? I think we touched on solutions quite a bit, right? Around like the intentional effort to create a lot of education work, to reach young folks where they are, to learn about these opportunities, to bring stakeholders together in the private and public sectors to create some reform that streamlines some processes. Is there anything else that you all feel like we didn't touch on there that's important to flag as solutions we are actively working on?
Well, I think the policy forum that we were at for NEI, where we all met, that exactly was what we needed to do, because there's different companies like Holtec, AWS, Duke Energy, and they're all sitting on stage, some of them having opposite problems or the same problems, and they're realizing, oh, we can work together. It's the connection and bringing the people together to understand and seeing where we can bridge that gap and how we can get that solution faster. And then once you get a team of people, then you can all push the effort, go and be able to go to Congress or talk to people about it and just bring it up even more. I think with education, yes, but it really has to start from the top, especially with policy and reform for big corporations, big energy, big utilities as well. Just all around, they need to come together and because if we're not all playing together, we're all going to be losing together.
Yeah, 100% agree. Dylan?
I think Kate's more qualified in this sense, having a broader scope on the industry. But I think things do look good, and I think we highlighted some key issues that kind of have, and the nature of these issues is systemic from my perspective. It's things that aren't just nuclear specific. I think nuclear is a part of a system that has existed long before fission was discovered, and we're kind of just dealing with the repercussions of some certain aspects of the energy industry that have just always been a little bit broken, and it's unfortunate. And we're doing the best that we can from our specific silo. And yeah, Kate's right. I mean, it always is going to start with grassroots, and Zeta is obviously doing a really good job about that. And NEI's subsidiary Nuclear Matters is doing that. That's another advocacy group if you guys haven't heard of them. And it's a really yeah, I really hope the positivity has been overshadowed any negativity that we pointed out here at the beginning, because it was important for us to highlight the issues at the beginning of this conversation, right? And um, there's always known solutions. It's getting the powers that be to listen, and we're all very familiar with that dynamic. And the exciting part is that we are doing our part, and we're in a really good position to get some really exciting work done. So, yeah.
Just had one little thing to add. I would have to say, just like we all we want to have the NRC to regulate, but a fine line of not too much where things are pushed back. I think that's the same viewpoint I have also with big energy or big nuclear, because some roles are super specific and they need it now and we don't have that. So if the role is open for 2 years, we have to do something about it. So being able to loosen things up a little so we can get the job done, I think is very important. And that's something that as a whole, we need to talk about more and push towards.
Yeah, I appreciate you flagging that as well as something for us to consider on the industry side. And I think what I want to kind of close with for folks is a belief, which is that Gen Z is going to be the generation that really figures out how to approach, lead, and be successful in nuclear energy. And I say that because it is a generation, I've said this before, I said this on stage with NEI, they see right through BS. We see right through BS. And as a result of that, I think we have very honest, very real conversation about what we need, how we need it, the reality of how we're going to get there, and also the pragmatism to know there will be bumps along the way. Nothing is perfect compared to every other alternative that we have that will meet the demand that the digital world is bringing. This is our best solution that also helps us move closer towards the environmental and climate goals that we have to do something about climate change. And that to me is really inspiring. I wholeheartedly believe that Gen Z is the generation that's going to lead this into success for industry, for communities, in policy. And I'm so excited that we were able to explore this conversation with you all to touch on that today, because I think this is a great introduction. I want to say thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Kate, for joining us in this conversation today. You all were amazing. This was such an awesome, fun, just genuinely entertaining conversation. And I want to say thank you for folks who were so engaged in the audience as well. Really, really thankful to you both. Thank you guys for making the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And the first time I met you, I was just nonstop talking about all of this because I'm truly passionate, and I'm so happy that I'm in a job where I can do both and lead the change, but also be part of the everyday. So I'm just excited to see what the next steps are. I couldn't be happier right now in the position that we're in. So thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. And I hope to see the folks in the chat working with us soon.
Exactly. Yeah, we gave them all the links, so they better sign up. We're gonna be engaging them for sure. This was our June Tech Talk, the future of energy, nuclear innovation powering the digital world. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.